This is BBC News. I'm Shaun Ley, live from Downing Street, at the heart of British politics, where Rishi Sunak will today take over as the British Prime Minister. Mr Sunak will have an audience with King Charles at Buckingham Palace later in the morning and will address the nation from just behind me outside the door of number 10 a little later.
We now need stability and unity, and I will make it my utmost priority to bring our party and our country together.
Before that, Liz Truss has just convened her final cabinet meeting after just 7 weeks in office, making her the shortest-serving Prime Minister in British history.
I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
This, though, is the easy bit, the well-orchestrated transition from one Prime Minister to another. After that, though, a tough road lies ahead for Prime Minister Sunak, with rising bills, rising inflation and rising interest rates. We will bring you more throughout another momentous day in British politics. Do stay with us on BBC News. Well, it has been a period of immense instability in British politics. The transitions between two prime ministers in a matter of months. A busy summer, a long contest to decide who would become the leader of the Conservative Party, the ruling party in the UK at the moment. They've been in office, first with coalition partners, then on their own, for 12 years. In the end, that race was run by the woman currently in number 10, Liz Truss. And she beat Rishi Sunak, the man who will now succeed her after just 7 weeks, after a disastrous budget was poorly received by the markets and a political crisis ensued. Mr Sunak will be the first British Asian to make it to number 10 Downing Street, and at 42 he becomes the youngest Prime Minister for more than 200 years since the appropriately named Pitt the Younger. Let's take you through what you can expect during the course of this morning. Liz Truss is currently holding a cabinet meeting inside number 10, the last of the current meeting of cabinet ministers, all of whom were only appointed about 6 weeks ago, many of whom will not be in any job by the end of today. She'll make a statement outside number 10 at around 10:15, and she carries out the short journey to Downing Street. It's about kind of less than a mile, and it's a lovely walk. But I suspect she's going to be doing it in the ministerial car, and you can hardly blame her. It's the last time she will be in one for now. We will doubtless see that journey from the skies and watch as it appears at Buckingham Palace, and there she will have an audience with the King. The King will ask her advice who to appoint as Prime Minister. We expect her to say Rishi Sunak. That will be the Constitutional Convention. After this, as she departs, Rishi Sunak will arrive, another seamless, carefully choreographed appearance. They never bump into each other outside. That would just be awkward, wouldn't it? He'll be invited to form a government by the King. He's likely to say yes. Then he's back to Downing Street, and the new Prime Minister will address the nation at around 11:35 from his new podium, a bespoke podium. Apparently, I didn't know this until today. Prime Ministers get their own podium, which is adjusted according to their height, so that the microphone is in exactly the right place. Over the next 24 hours, we can expect to see a trickle of cabinet appointments, possibly even a flood, actually, because Mr Sunak has known now for quite a few hours that he was going to be Prime Minister, and it's hard to believe that although they won't say anything publicly, he won't have been making a few discreet soundings, and at the very least, sketching out the sort of cabinet team he wants. The mistake he has to avoid is the one many political observers, including many Conservative MPs, now think was made, and that was having a cabinet made up only of his political allies. Well, in a moment, I'll be joined in Downing Street by Chief Political Correspondent Nick Eardley. First, though, let's hear from David Wallace-Lockhart.
The moment Rishi Sunak became leader of his party.
Good afternoon. As returning officer in the leadership election, I can confirm that we have received one valid nomination.
He'll officially become Prime Minister later this morning. His nearest rival, Penny Mordaunt, was unable to get enough support from fellow MPs to force a vote of the party membership. Rishi Sunak was ultimately unopposed. He'll be the UK's first British Asian Prime Minister and its youngest for more than 200 years.
It is the greatest privilege of my life to be able to serve the party I love and give back to the country I owe so much to. The United Kingdom is a great country, but there is no doubt we face a profound economic challenge. We now need stability and unity, and I will make it my utmost priority to bring our party and our country together.
A change of power happens again without a general election. Opposition parties believe it's time the public had a say.
He's the third Prime Minister in 3 months, the fifth in 6 years. We've had 4 Chancellors in 4 months. It's all been very chaotic and unstable.
It's increasingly clear that the Conservatives don't trust the British people, and they're not going to give the British people the say that they should have. And I think people are furious about that, actually.
Scotland's First Minister wants to work constructively, but agrees that the voters need to be heard.
He's the second person in a row to be appointed as Prime Minister by Tories, not elected by the population. The idea that he can go 2 years before seeking or winning a democratic mandate, I think, is just unthinkable.
Attention will soon turn to the question of who will make up Rishi Sunak's top team. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt's been working on an economic plan to be published on the 31st of October. But will he be the person to deliver it? The soon-to-be Prime Minister says uniting his party is a priority. The composition of his new cabinet will be of vital importance here. David Wallace-Lockhart, BBC News, Westminster.
And our chief political correspondent, Nick Eardley, is with me. Nick, it's a very busy morning, but we shouldn't underestimate the fact that it's going to be a very, very busy few months for the new Prime Minister, starting, of course, with that big statement next week on the budget, the bits we were missing.
I mean, it's hard to think of a more daunting entry for Rishi Sunak. But a sense of deja vu. I said that 7 weeks ago when Liz Truss turned up. But amazingly, the situation has only got more problematic for a new Prime Minister. There was the turmoil in the markets, inflation is still going up, people are facing higher bills and prices, and at the same time the Conservative Party hasn't managed to get its act together yet and figure out exactly what it actually wants to do with power. So when Rishi Sunak arrives here in a couple of hours' time, he will know that his time in office is going to be defined by what he does on the economy. He will know that he has to hit the ground running. And as you say, the first thing that he needs to work out is whether the plan that the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has been drawing up over the past few weeks is going in the right direction. Mr. Sunak will want to stamp his own authority on it, I would have thought, and decide for sure exactly what spending cuts and what tax rises we might see to balance the books.
Because in a sense we can't say this 7 weeks never happened. It has left a legacy. It's not just a legacy over the question of competence for the Conservative Party, it's also a legacy in terms of the economic damage that was done in a relatively short period.
I mean, absolutely. I think there will be a lot of Conservatives who try and gloss over the last 7 weeks and almost pretend it didn't happen, but you know, you speak to a lot of Tory MPs, you speak to economists or you listen to economists, and a lot of them will say that Liz Truss has made Rishi Sunak's job a lot harder.
Yes.
There'll be that strange moment today when there's the physical handover of power, when we see staff members come out here, then go back through number 11, then disappear out the back door.
Yes, because some of them won't have jobs anymore.
A lot of them won't have jobs. You know, the political aides, the special advisors that Mr. Sunak wants to bring in will replace Ms. Truss's.
We're just seeing some of the cabinet arrivals from this morning, including Jeremy Hunt. Is Jeremy Hunt the one person in the cabinet who can be pretty confident that he's still going to have a job?
He was asked this morning when he left his house, he said he didn't know. I think it's highly likely he will keep his job for the simple reason that he's managed to get a bit of stability in the economy, get the markets in a place where they're not panicking as much about what the government is doing. So I think he's probably one who stays in his job. But when it comes to the rest of the cabinet, Mr. Sunak has big decisions to make.
Because presumably he can't make the mistake that many think Liz Truss made, which was just pack it with loyalists.
And Boris Johnson.
Yes.
They both did the same, and I don't think we'll see that from the new Prime Minister. Speaking to his allies this morning, they want to see a more diverse cabinet with more wings of the Conservative Party in there to try and bring it together. But that brings with it its own problems, because we've heard a lot of Conservative MPs say this morning, get on with governing, forget about the ideological stuff, get on with governing. Well, actually, I would suggest the two things are linked. If you think of the economic decisions that are coming, what cuts do you make? That's ideological. What taxes do you put up? That's ideological. Take immigration as one example. There are Tory MPs who would argue that you need to relax immigration rules to get more migrant workers in to boost the economy. But there are also senior Tories who would say we made a promise to the electorate to bring immigration down. That was a big part of why they think people voted for Brexit. So they'll be arguing you need to deliver that. So, you will hear a lot of calls for unity over the next few hours. But Shaun, if the last few months have taught us anything, it's easier said than done.
It's very clear, isn't it? You mentioned this question of immigration, because that's interwoven with the post-Brexit environment in which Britain lives. Britain is trying to project itself to the world. We heard about this idea of a globalised Britain under Boris Johnson. Liz Truss talked about growth as being the engine of recovery for the British economy. Part of that growth is going to be external. The Diwali celebrations are going on at the moment. Great time for a Hindu to enter number 10 Downing Street. We heard Narendra Modi and his government apparently delighted by the appointment of Rishi Sunak, precisely because they presumably think if anyone is going to be more sympathetic to their argument that we have the skilled labour which you need in Britain if you're going to grow the economy, it's Rishi Sunak because of his strong heritage in India.
Yes, look, I think that will be part of the argument, but it's also just worth remembering Rishi Sunak's political background as well as his upbringing as well, because Mr Sunak is a Brexiteer. He is somebody who backed Brexit against the warnings of senior politicians at the time. He doesn't like the idea of being too tied to the European Union. Yes, he voted for some of the Brexit deals, but he's not someone who's ideologically in a completely different place when it comes to Europe than the last two Prime Ministers. So don't assume that suddenly he comes up with a closer relationship with Europe just to satisfy the economic demands. He's political as well. He's a small state Tory at heart.
You don't get to be Prime Minister if you're not very, very political. It's not an accident he's ended up in number 10.
Well, yes, he has been helped by circumstances.
Yes. Events, dear boy, as Harold Macmillan used to say.
The political fortunes of Rishi Sunak have gone up and down like the British economy in the last few weeks. 7 weeks ago, when Liz Truss arrived here, we thought that Rishi Sunak's political career was pretty much over. He may well have left Parliament or decided to do something else. Today, a couple of hours from now, he gets the top job.
7 weeks' time, perhaps we should have this conversation again. Nick Eardley, Chief Political Correspondent, I know you'll be back with us for now. Thank you very much. Let's talk now to the BBC's royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell, who is outside Buckingham Palace. Nick, good morning to you, as it is here in the UK. What constitutional process will we see played out over the next couple of hours?
Morning, Shaun. Yes, well, the choreography is well practiced. We've seen it, of course, most recently just 7 weeks ago to the day on the 6th of September, and that was all up at Balmoral because of the frailty of Queen Elizabeth. On that occasion, her last formal duty 2 days before her death, we saw Boris Johnson attend Balmoral to resign as Prime Minister, and then Liz Truss to be invited to form a government. That was 7 weeks ago, and essentially we will see the same choreography played out again this morning, though in a very much more straightforward manner in terms of the logistics, because it will all take place here at Buckingham Palace. Now the clouds have parted. There is some rather lovely autumn sunshine shining down at the moment, and at 10:30, after the cabinet session that she is now chairing, Liz Truss will come to Buckingham Palace and she will tender her resignation to King Charles. This, of course, will be the first time that he has presided over this transition of Prime Minister. And then at about 11 o'clock London time, Rishi Sunak will arrive. And there will be an audience with the King. The King, under the British Constitution, is the one person who can invite somebody to become Prime Minister. He will invite that person to form a government. Now, this is one of those areas where the sovereign can exercise what's known as the royal prerogative. He will have been given advice by Liz Truss as to whom he should invite to form a government, but he's not obliged to follow that advice. The criteria here in the United Kingdom is that the Prime Minister is the leader of the largest party in the House of Commons. He must be a person, or he or she must be a person who can command the confidence of the House of Commons, and it will be on that basis that the King will invite Rishi Sunak, as leader now of the Conservative Party, to form a government and to become Prime Minister. The ceremony is known as the kissing of hands. This is a kind of legacy from centuries ago. There is no kissing, but there will be simply a handshake. So this morning we will see Britain's shortest serving Prime Minister, Liz Truss, handing over to Britain's youngest Prime Minister for more than 200 years, since William Pitt the Younger was appointed Prime Minister at the age of 24 in the late part of the 18th century. But more significantly, of course, Rishi Sunak will be the first British Prime Minister of colour, of Indian origin, and that, I think, will be a matter of particular satisfaction to King Charles, who's made such a point over the years as Prince of Wales in support of diversity, in support of diversity of faith and multiculturalism here in the United Kingdom.
Nick, there are those who will view this as a wholly anachronistic process, that raw power is about Parliament, it's about who, as you say, commands the House of Commons, and that this is kind of theatre that in some ways kind of blurs the reality. What's the view of the importance of it inside the royal household?
I think it is one of the main tasks that a British sovereign carries out, to invite somebody to form a government, to become Prime Minister, and it is that separation, isn't it? The power of the government, the executive, and having a monarch who is above the political fray, this complete separation, and that, I think, is regarded as I say, as a particular matter of importance and a very particular and important duty that the sovereign has. And it is, as I mentioned a moment ago, it is still an area in which the monarch can exercise this old something called the royal prerogative, though in point of fact, in practice, the monarch will always invite the person who leads the largest party in the House of Commons to form a government. But yes, this is certainly an important moment, both for the royal household, for the monarchy to be seen to be exercising this duty, this responsibility, this separation of the role of the monarch from the political establishment, to appoint and invite somebody to become Prime Minister.
Mick Witchell, outside Buckingham Palace. For now, thank you very much. Well, let's talk about the hard political realities that are facing the new Prime Minister when he takes office later this morning. The economy, of course, is the critical one. After that badly received budget by the former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, who Liz Truss promptly sacked, replaced him with Jeremy Hunt. Jeremy Hunt, in effect, collapsed the economic policy that Liz Truss had won the Conservative leadership election on, which was a big push for growth, tax cuts funded by extended borrowing, and some kind of supply side changes which were thought to include speeding up things like planning reform in the UK, allowing more infrastructure construction, and also spending cuts. All of that was put on hold by the arrival of Jeremy Hunt. He has his budget on, what a date to choose, the 31st of October, next Monday, All Hallows Eve, a time for spooks and ghouls and all things creepy to emerge. And there were some creepy prospects in terms of the public finances. Let's talk now to Carl Emerson, Deputy Director at the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which took a pretty hard line on Liz Truss's proposal. Carl Emerson, thank you very much for being with us. Let's start, first of all, for kind of new viewers, start here. Remind us about the impact of that budget and where it leaves the economic situation that the new Prime Minister is facing.
Absolutely. In fact, if we go all the way back to March, when Rishi Sunak was Chancellor, he left a situation where it looked like there was about £30 billion worth of wiggle room against the government's fiscal targets that then just legislated. Two big changes then followed. Firstly, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, massive increase in European gas prices, clearly meaning a much worse outlook for the UK economy and requiring the UK government to step in and provide a lot of support to households and business with their energy bills. And then secondly, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget, which had £45 billion worth of tax cuts, with no attempt to show how they'd be paid for with either spending cuts or tax rises elsewhere. So that left the public finances in a precarious state, debt on a rising path. And at that point, we estimated a fiscal tightening of around £60 billion might be needed to stabilise things. That's to keep debt on a path where it's not continuing to rise ever more. Now, Jeremy Hunt since then has reversed £32 billion worth of those tax rises. So they've been cancelled. So the situation is not as bad as it looked a couple of weeks ago, but there's still some very difficult decisions to be made, and they're coming just next Monday. So that's clearly going to be the top of Mr. Sunak's new in train.
To what extent is inflation eating into the pie that the government has to distribute through public spending?
So inflation is causing lots of problems. It's pushing up how much the government's spending on debt interest. It pushes up how much we need to spend on state pensions, on welfare benefits, if we're going to keep their value preserved in real terms. And it also means that the spending allocations to public services that were set out a year ago by Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak now don't look anywhere near as generous as what was intended. Public services also use energy. They're having public sector pay demands that are bigger than what they expected. And if you're the Ministry of Defence, you actually buy products that are priced in dollars. So all of that makes it much more expensive. And we think that if you did want to restore the generosity of those spending plans to what was intended a year ago, you're probably looking at needing to find something like £20 billion by the final year of this Parliament. And that seems highly unlikely to happen given the tightness of the fiscal situation.
Carl, let's talk about one other aspect of this, which is the options in terms of taxation. There's been a big push and concern in the Conservative Party that under Rishi Sunak, and after all, we shouldn't forget he was Chancellor until he resigned from Boris Johnson's cabinet, precipitating Boris Johnson's own resignation, and that is enough for some Conservatives to think he should never have been allowed to become Prime Minister, and that he has to deal with that legacy, particularly potentially among some in the party membership. But let's put that aside. He was Chancellor. He's the man who put up taxes to their highest level, we're told, well, you told us at the IFS, in nearly 70 years. The Truss plan was to cut some of those tax increases. Some of them have already been restored by Jeremy Hunt. Can he go back to where he was when he delivered his own budget back in the spring?
Well, there's a political question about what's possible there. I mean, the tax system now looks a little bit different to what Rishi Sunak left it. We've cut stamp duty. We've also got rid of the health and social care levy. So the tax burden is not going to be quite as high as what we fought back in March, but it's still going to be very high and around its highest level since the 1950s. And I think you have to look at, well, why was Rishi Sunak and indeed Boris Johnson pushing up the tax burden? It was clearly predicated on a desire to spend more on health and social care, a desire, or at least an inability, a desire not to cut anywhere else. So it was an end to austerity for all government departments, and also a desire to get the government borrowing back down. So that pointed to the need to put taxes up. We're now in a position where we most certainly need to restore the sustainability of the public finances, and we have choices to make about how much do we want to do on the tax side, putting taxes up, and how much we want to do on the spending side, squeezing spending on public services or on cash payments to working age families and pensioners.
Lovely. Carl Emerson from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, thank you very much. Now, there was a lovely moment when the Cabinet Ministers arrived here this morning when Ben Wallace made this kind of big, expansive gesture with his hands as he arrived up Downing Street, as if to say, well, I asked him, Mr. Wallace, can you translate? And he just shook his head. I'd love to know what he was thinking at that point. He is one of those people who would have thought relatively safe in his job, hugely popular with the Conservative Party members. There are others who think maybe he might have his ambitions elsewhere. He, after all, decided not to run in this leadership contest. He was a close ally of Boris Johnson since the days of the Brexit referendum. And there would be those who think maybe he would be somebody who could be a future NATO Secretary-General. Remember, Jens Stoltenberg, the current Secretary-General, is due to leave and take up a post running his country's sovereign wealth fund. We'll leave that thought behind, but we can talk about cabinet dilemmas to Nick Eardley, our chief political correspondent. Nick, this is a really difficult, it's not just a shuffling of the pack, is it? There we go, Jacob Rees-Mogg just leaving. I don't know if that's just the cabinet maybe breaking up. I did wonder if the outgoing cabinet might gather around Liz Truss to applaud her departure. Perhaps not, they've all got jobs to do. But it's a terribly difficult task for now. Exactly, because it's not simply shuffling the pack.
No, I think that's right. And Rishi Sunak, when he gets in here this afternoon, will have a lot to weigh up because he wants to do a number of different things. I think he probably keeps Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor, not confirmed, but that's my hunch, for the simple reason that Mr Hunt's managed to bring a bit stability.
Why make the markets nervous again?
Exactly. But beyond that, there's a bit of a balancing act because Rishi Sunak will want to bring some of his close allies in, the people who have worked with him over the last few months, like Dominic Raab, I would have thought, the former Deputy Prime Minister. But he also wants to bring in people.
We're just seeing the cabinet ministers leaving now.
Like the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, an ally of Boris Johnson.
Foreign Secretary, good morning. What was the mood this morning? How would you characterise the mood, Foreign Secretary?
You staying in your job, Mr Cleverly? He doesn't know the answer. Maybe a bit of an unfair question, actually. This is the good thing about standing at this side of Downing Street.
Saying goodbye to our viewers in the United States. Sorry to interrupt you, Nick.
That's okay. The good thing about standing here is that it's quite narrow. People can't avoid you in the same way that they
even if they don't say
there.
anything.
Yes. So look, just to recap, Rishi Sunak will want to bring in his allies. Yes. He will want to keep some people in jobs that offer stability to the economy, but he'll also want to give the impression that he's uniting his party, bringing in maybe some of Boris Johnson's allies or some of Liz Truss's allies. That's something that neither of the last two really did.
What about all that talent that all those ministers of state have been knocking around for years, who a lot of their colleagues think would be rather good cabinet ministers, but just kind of haven't quite had the opportunity?
Really good question, because Mr Sunak, remember Rishi Sunak's only been an MP for 7 years.
He's done rather well.
He became Chancellor by accident, really. Because remember, Sajid Javid quit in a row over who his political aides would be with Dominic Cummings. So yes, I mean that's a really good question. Does he bring more fresh blood into the cabinet to try and revitalise government with a couple of years to go to an election?
Let's not beat about them. Some of them have been knocking around for quite a while now.
Yeah, I think you're
and everybody's energy
right.
levels, particularly it's an intensive job. We sometimes forget how demanding it is to be a cabinet minister in terms of your time being managed by civil servants. You've got to balance commitments in the House of Commons, visits around the country, keeping up with the paperwork, being in meetings, having ideas,
being shouted at in
Downing Street by fools like you and me, and also having a constituency to represent.
Yeah, and there are a lot of Conservative MPs just now who are really worried about their constituencies, who will be wanting to spend a lot more time trying to shore up their personal vote. There's Michelle Donnellan, the Education Secretary. No, she's not. She was Culture Secretary. Yep. She was Education Secretary for 2 days. She's Culture Secretary just now. Will she have a job by the end of the day? Let's wait and see. One job that will be interesting to keep an eye on, and a challenging one, is Chief Whip.
Yes.
Wendy Morton, I'm almost certain, will not be Chief Whip by the end of the day. She's had a pretty tough time of it. She's not gone down all that well with some Conservative MPs. It was a row over discipline in the party that broke the camel's back for Liz Truss.
Finished off Liz Truss last week.
Exactly. So let's see who gets that Chief Whip job. It'll be really important for Mr Sunak, because as well as those ideological differences from wings of the party, the thing to watch out for over the next few weeks is we hear a lot of Conservatives say, just get on with delivery. Don't worry about ideology, just get on with delivering. But I don't think the two are possible to separate, because if you talk about, for example, economic growth, different Conservative MPs have very different visions of how you get it. They all agree it's a good idea, but some would say liberalise rules on immigration, get more migrant workers in. Some would say the opposite, that there was a political promise made. Some would say have a closer relationship with Europe. Some would say absolutely don't. So Rishi Sunak can't just come in here and wave a magic wand and make all those issues go away. Whatever calls for unity we hear, there are real tensions in the Conservative Party. the party, it's still been trying to work out exactly what it stands for. It's his job now to try and keep them together.
Nick Eardley, as ever, thank you very much. The magic wand, along with the magic money tree, wouldn't they be nice? Now, I tell you what we can say for the Prime Minister is that back home in his constituency of Richmond and North Yorkshire, they'll be pouring a few pints, opening maybe a bottle of fizz and celebrating that their boy has come good in the end. Of course, not the first time they've had a successful local MP. His predecessor was William Hague, a less successful leader but a very successful Foreign Secretary, well known internationally. Before that, they had Leon Britton, who was Home Secretary in Margaret Thatcher's government. So Richmond in North Yorkshire has always done rather well out of its Conservative MPs. Let's join Ben Boulos now, who's in the constituency, has been taking the temperature. Hello to you, Ben.
Good morning, Shaun. It is a little early, I think, for pulling the pints and popping the fizz, but it is a beautiful morning here in the Market Square in Richmond. This is, of course, Rishi Sunak's own constituency. He's been the MP here since 2015. Let's come into the tea rooms. Rather nice tea rooms they've opened up for us here this morning. We've had some figures that really reflect the cost of living pressures that will be at the very top of the new Prime Minister's agenda. The Office for National Statistics this morning has published figures. They've looked at 30 typical grocery items and they've looked at the cheapest options on the shelves that you can buy. They have found that those have gone up by 17% in September compared with a year before. That means those basic, those value, those budget items in the grocery basket are going up faster than general inflation, goods and services in the economy, inflation generally running at about 10%. But let me pick out some of the items that they've highlighted that have gone up even more. Vegetable oil for cooking has gone up 65% in September compared with the year before. The cheapest pasta you can get, up by an average of 60%. Budget tea bags, up 46%. Even milk has gone up by 30%. It is really putting a squeeze on households and businesses. We can speak to Barry. He's chatting to his customers here. Barry, come over and have a chat to us this morning. Thanks for having us down here. Just tell us about the pressures you are facing as a business and what you're noticing the biggest cost squeeze is for you.
Sure. Well, I think, look, it's across the board. You know, obviously, energy costs have gone up, and we're definitely feeling the pinch on that. With that, I guess our suppliers are putting up their prices to kind of cope, which then affects us. And we're also noticing our customers are really starting to struggle now as well. But, you know, like anybody, we're just adapting and trying to do everything we can to make it good for people.
Your local MP, now the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, what would you like to see him do to help businesses like yours?
Look, I think just understand the situation that we're in. You know, if anything, this is probably more complicated than COVID now, you know, more challenging than COVID was. And I think the understanding of that and just give us that little bit of support we need just to help us see us through the next few months into next year, and then trust us, you know, small, medium-sized businesses, we'll figure out a way of making it work and we'll move the country forward. OK, Barry, thanks very much. We've got another one of the customers here who also has his own business. We've got Steve. Steve, you run a coffee business. What are you noticing the big pressures?
Rounton Coffee. So it's just businesses changing behaviours. So where businesses before are ready to go, ready to invest in new equipment and that, they're just pausing, taking their time and reconsidering where they want to put their capital. And then other things, you know, so a few months ago when the dollar crashed, we buy in dollars.
The pound crashed against the dollar.
The pound crashed against the dollar, so something like that is going to affect us. Thankfully, it's come back up again, but they're the sorts of things where things are a bit unstable. They're the things that concern us. So what could Rishi do? Settle it down, bring us together. Let's just have a quiet few months.
OK, thank you very much. So that's the effect on businesses. I want to get a bit of a picture on how it's affecting people day to day and households. We can speak to Pete, who runs the food bank here in Richmond. The Prime Minister's own constituency. Just give us a sense of the picture you experience as someone who runs that food bank.
Yeah, so we're seeing a significant increase in the amount of people accessing the food bank services. Year on year, we're seeing more families, more individuals, especially people that you'd have maybe thought beforehand wouldn't need to access a food bank, beginning to come through our doors. And it's alarming, really. We're seeing so much more need and so much more unanticipated need as well, which is, yeah, it's quite frightening. But we do our best, yeah. OK. Pete, thank you very much indeed. And let's just finish up by showing you some of the sweet treats that they have on display here. Isn't all of this just so unbelievably tempting? They've even got the Halloween cupcakes ready. Of course, Halloween next Monday, the same day that we get the government's tax and spending plan. So I just wonder whether we rename these
fiscal cupcakes. What do you think, Shaun? Has a ring to it, perhaps?
Oh, Ben, that's a tempting thought. Listen, I hope you enjoy yourself up there, and I hope you get a pint eventually. You're right, it is a bit early UK time for that. But as they say, the sun is over the yardarm somewhere in the world. Ben Boulos in Richmond in North Yorkshire. Thank you very much. Now, it was the grassroots members of the Conservative Party who in the end rejected Rishi Sunak in favour of Liz Truss in the summer leadership election. They didn't get a say this time because only one candidate put their name forward in this leadership contest, so it was effectively no contest. So will they get behind the new Prime Minister? We're going to speak now to three of them. I am joined by Chloe Ahmed, who is the chair of the Chelmsford Conservative Association. She is in Essex. James Dosworth, a member of the Young Conservative Network in the centre there. And we're also joined by Tamara Wood, who is from Telford Conservative Association. Thank you all very much. Chloe, can I start with you? You've put out some fairly scathing comments over the last few weeks about your party on social media. How are you feeling this morning?
I'm quite happy that Rishi's taken the lead. I initially voted for Rishi in the summer. I'm excited for what's going to happen now in the kind of I think the best sense that we can make it. But we've got to pull together. I think the backing of sort of grassroots needs to be there as well, and obviously especially within the MPs, there needs to be that unity. It needs to be present. Hopefully.
What was the source of? Sorry to interrupt. What was the source of your dissatisfaction?
I found it quite. It's been embarrassing of what has gone on lately. I don't think we should have had. The last 2 months shouldn't have happened. I think there's kind of been a lot of rift between the party. If you look back, I say, for me, I look back to, you go back to 2016 with Brexit, and there's just been that continued rift. And it's not just within the Conservative Party, it is within politics as a whole. But that hasn't seemed to have healed. Boris kind of, he did get Brexit through, but then we kind of went into the pandemic and, life's been pretty chaotic, I'd say, really since 2016 politically. So what it'd be nice to see now is a lot of unity within the party, everyone working together just to make everything better for everybody else day to day and create some, to see those policies come to fruition and create some calm. That would be nice.
Tamara Wood in Telford in Shropshire. Are you disappointed not to have a say this time around?
Yes, disappointed, and many of my officers and a few of our members that have reported back to us are quite angry that they haven't had a say. One of the key reasons that people get involved in politics is of the grassroots people is to be involved and have a say in who the leader is.
James, let me talk to you, James Dosworth, Young Conservative Network. I'll come back to all of you in a moment as well. But James, what's your take on this transition from Truss to Sunak?
I do think it had to happen. I think, despite I did vote for Liz Truss the initial round of voting back in September, which I do somewhat regret. I think we did have to move towards a unity candidate, and I don't think that could really have been achieved through having a membership vote in terms of what was best for the country. Whilst I completely take the point made before that one of the main reasons people do join political parties is to have a say in who runs them, I think when you're in power, especially in such a tumultuous time, these changes need to be made very quickly. So introducing the person who had by far and away the greatest amount of support in the parliamentary party as the leader does make a lot of sense, and perhaps the Conservative Party should look into tweaking its rules for how we do choose leaders when we are actually in power.
James, you're in Durham. I mean, Durham City, of course, has long been a Labour seat. You've had Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister, just up the road in Sedgefield for many years. The Conservatives won Sedgefield, of course, in 2019, and they won a host of other seats around the North East. How confident or how nervous would you say Conservatives are in your part of the country now?
Well, I should just say that I'm here at Durham University. I don't live here full time, but one thing I will say is that I think people are quite nervous. I think, as many faults as Boris Johnson did have, he was incredibly popular as a vote winner up in the northeast of England. We saw that in 2019, that his sort of personality and his charisma were incredibly effective up here. People really felt like they spoke to him. I'm not sure that Rishi Sunak is going to have quite the same impact. However, on the flip side of things, I think in our sort of core voter areas, people refer to the blue wall quite a lot now. I think Rishi will be far more popular. I think he's more what those sort of traditional Tory voters are looking for. So quite how we balance our electoral split from 2019 will remain to be seen, but it will certainly be quite a large challenge as we don't have the sort of two main things that drew people to us in 2019, being Brexit and Boris Johnson.
Tamara Wood, let me go back to you because you're in the English Midlands, one of the most contested parts of the UK. Shropshire is probably thought of as Tory territory, but there are parts in some of the towns where they've had Labour representation. How worried are you and your colleagues about all of this? Not least, of course, for the point you've already made about motivating party members and party workers after years in office to fight another election, perhaps sometime in the next couple of years.
I think we're going to find it very hard, particularly in Telford, which is more urban than many other parts of Shropshire. And up until our MP Lucy Allen was elected in 2015, it had been a Labour stronghold and we're still a Labour unitary council. I disagree with the previous points that when in power, it should be the MPs that choose. It's not the MPs on the whole that day to day are standing on the doorstep. It's activists like myself and members that have to defend. And at the moment, I'm really struggling. For the first time since I was 16, I have been a Conservative voter. For the first time, I'm struggling to defend my party.
Let me ask, you're struggling to defend the party. Why? What is it that's changed in policy terms? Is it the mistakes that were made under Liz Truss's leadership? Is it the idea, the perception of chaos? What is it you're struggling to defend?
Struggling to defend, first and foremost, the integrity issue with Rishi and Boris. And so that is when it started. The move away from the 2019 manifesto that we were elected on. The rise in national insurance was a very big issue with our membership. That's when it started. And then now in the leadership elections, it has been chaos. New rules were made up for this second election and the membership have been excluded. We're lacking integrity and the members are not happy at the moment.
On the integrity question, are you then worried by what may come out of the public inquiry into COVID and whether, because Rishi Sunak was one of the key decision makers during the course of that period, along with Boris Johnson, of course, that might potentially make him politically vulnerable?
Of course. And I do believe that his actions against Boris show a lack of integrity, and he was rejected by the members only so many weeks ago. So for me, I don't believe we have a unity candidate or a candidate with the 2019 manifesto at the heart of what they're going to deliver.
So unlike James, you don't regret the decision to elect Liz Truss?
It's a difficult one. What I regret are the comments of the MPs last week blaming the membership for Liz Truss. We're given a choice of two. Those MPs put those two in the final two. And as you've already seen, the membership don't believe Rishi was the leader. I do believe that is around his policies. A lot of conventional Conservatives are low tax, so they're going to struggle with his policies. So they didn't give us the choice, and out of the choice they gave us, we took the only choice we could take.
Let me give the last word to Chloe, who we talked to at the start. Chloe Ahmed in Chelmsford. Your part of Essex is thought of as more Tory and more safely Tory. What's the mood there in that part of the country now, in the southeast of England?
I would say from sort of who I've been speaking to the last few days is that everyone's very much, Rishi's got to show us what he can do now, and the MPs need to as well. We need to see that kind of, as I said earlier, the unity coming together and building a future of the UK that people can be proud of, and not just as the Conservative, but throughout the country, because it's a very tough time right now, and we need to be able to see that we've got a stable government that's going to, fight for us to be able to give everybody the lives they need to be living. And the kind of the energy crisis and everything else kind of creeping up on us. A lot of that's taken the back bench the last kind of few weeks, and there needs to be some more clarification of the help that's going to be there, and not just for kind of everybody at home, but for those that are running businesses as well. Where I am, there's kind of quite a large number of small businesses, and people are, we don't know what's going to happen. And yeah, I think we need that continuity, we need the unity, we need that strong direction, and that's what we're hoping that Rishi's going to bring for us.
Chloe Ahmed from Chelmsford Conservative, James Dodsworth from the Young Conservative Network, studying at Durham University, and Tamara Wood in Telford in Shropshire. Thank you all very much. Pleasure to speak to you. I hope we'll talk to you again here on BBC News. Now, you may have seen during the course of hearing from our three guests some activity in Downing Street. They are setting up for the statement from the outgoing Prime Minister Liz Truss, which is expected in about half an hour's time, just before she leaves Downing Street for the last time and travels to Buckingham Palace to surrender the seals of office according to formality. I don't actually know if she hands over seals of office. There are seals of office. There is physical arcana, if you like, that goes with the job. But I think that is usually transferred in a slightly more convoluted way rather than immediately on the day in the hands of the King. The activity is because they're having to technically set up a sound desk to mix the sound from the microphone. I was corrected by Nick a little earlier when I said podium. Apparently it's a lectern, and apparently he had to put up with the lectern from Liz Truss yesterday when he made his statement. Chances are he'll be using the same lectern while those who design and build these things, good work for lectern builders at the moment, while the people who design and build these things construct one that is to his taste. So we'll see him probably in front of the same lectern as Liz Truss uses in a half an hour's time here in Downing Street. Now, one of the big things on Rishi Sunak's in-tray is a free trade deal with India. This is something that Boris Johnson championed enthusiastically. You remember he was frustrated in his hope to go on a visit to India early in the year. Eventually, I think, met Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister. It's Diwali, of course, and what a day it was yesterday to celebrate the arrival of the first Hindu Prime Minister in British history, the first Prime Minister, Asian Prime Minister, and of course of Indian origin, because it was his grandparents on both sides of the family who came to the UK, half a century ago, and made their lives here. And provided the basis on which he is now Prime Minister, the career, the life and opportunities that Rishi Sunak has led. Let's talk now to our correspondent in Delhi, Rajini Vaidyanathan. Rajini, talk us through the politics of this in terms of the possibility of a free trade deal between India and the United Kingdom.
Well, as you say, it's been talked about for some time now. It was earlier this year that I was reporting from Delhi on how Boris Johnson was in town and how he and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had set a deadline of Diwali to sign that free trade agreement, that FTA. And of course, yesterday was Diwali. There was no free trade agreement. It sort of stalled. A lot of speculation swirling around, perhaps the comments from former Home Secretary Suella Braverman saying that it was Indians who overstayed their visas in the UK as the largest group may have impacted some of that chatter. Also, of course, all the turmoil in British politics won't have been ideal in terms of advancing those talks. But there is a lot of hope from this side that actually now, with a new Prime Minister about to be installed, some of those talks can get back on track. And I think one thing that is interesting, I was looking back at some of the comments that Rishi Sunak has made in the past about India-UK relations. And one thing he's talked about in the past is how he sees this as an equal partnership and how he sees the value of highly educated young Indians being able to work overseas in the UK. And of course, immigration, as you know, Shaun, is one of those things that always comes up when both sides are thrashing out talks over an India-UK trade deal.
Rajini, to what extent had progress been made on other aspects of this? I mean, is there a lot of interoperability between kind of safety standards, between quality standards in terms of Indian products, Indian services, British services?
There's all kinds of things that fly around when people talk about the UK-India trade deal. People talk about whiskey, people talk about milk, health, safety standards, health imports, all those kinds of things. But I think the real challenge now is just getting things back on track. And I think the hope, if you read Prime Minister Narendra Modi's statement yesterday, is that things will be back on track now. There's a new Prime Minister, and particularly with it being Rishi Sunak. Prime Minister Narendra Modi issued a tweet yesterday. He congratulated Rishi Sunak and said he looked forward to working closely in implementing that Roadmap 2030, which isn't just actually about trade partnerships, but also partnerships in other areas as well. So education, for example, and other fields as well. So it's about bringing the two countries together. And he talked about a living bridge. It's a phrase that a lot of diplomats use, and it's the idea that actually people-to-people contact is what brings these countries together. And in many ways, as Prime Minister Modi said in that statement, someone like Rishi Sunak embodies that.
Virginia van den Eythen in Delhi, thank you very much for now. Let's come back to the political situation domestically and talk now to Craig Williams MP, a Rishi Sunak supporter. He also knows the reality of what it is to represent a marginal seat. It's got a somewhat safe seat now. But Craig, you were originally elected for Cardiff, a marginal seat, and you held that only for a couple of years because the then Prime Minister, Theresa May, was tempted into a snap general election, paid the price by losing a majority, and people like you were the casualties of that. Presumably you are not terribly keen for a general election right now, despite the change of Prime Minister.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. Yep, it was definitely an election that we didn't want, and I still have the political scars from. So there is no appetite from me, but I can tell you from the 22 last night, which was electric when the Prime Minister-elect walked in, that there is no appetite anywhere. My constituents and businesses tell me they want us to unite, they want us to get on with the job and sort out the big issues of the day. No election.
You now represent Montgomeryshire with a very healthy majority, which I think, to your credit, went up at the 2019 election. To what extent do you feel that the success in 2019 was a Boris effect rather than necessarily a Tory effect?
Yeah, no, Montgomeryshire. I'm born and bred, so I'm delighted to represent that seat now. Boris was a terrific campaigner, is a terrific campaigner. He's world class, and there is no doubt that election he brought his usual electric campaigning ability and was a massive benefit. But at the next election, I have no doubt we will have Boris the campaign machine behind the Conservative Party and Rishi Sunak. So it's not or, it's and. You know, we unite now and we'll deploy all the big beasts come the election in many, many months, if not years.
Now, you say unite. We'll wait and see on that. If with respect, the jury is perhaps out given the events of the last few months. Let's talk about Cabinet. There's clearly an expectation that there will be some Rishi Sunak appointees in the Cabinet, and perhaps an attempt to overcome the criticism of Liz Truss's Cabinet and arguably Boris Johnson's, that it was too much a Cabinet of mates, of people who thought the same. How important is this that it's a broader-based Cabinet this time around?
It's very important, and you know, I don't, knowing the man, knowing our new Prime Minister, it won't be about egos. It will be about uniting, and I think we can just push back on that, but it will be about getting the right players around that table and having proper cabinet responsibility. Adults in the room, not that there haven't been, adults in the room just getting on, governing and having tough decisions.
Right, let me ask you one direct question on that. Would it help you in campaigning terms, for example, to have a Welsh secretary that represented a Welsh constituency rather than an English one?
Look, I think that those kind of decisions, Scotland, Wales, the devolved administrations are incredibly important, and a relationship with them, but also having people that can speak and campaign day in, day out. I will certainly be asking for that.
Craig Williams, MP for Montgomeryshire. Thank you very much for joining us. Rishi Sunak supporter there. Let's talk about the challenge that he faces electorally now. There isn't going to be a general election, despite the fact Labour, the Liberal Democrats, the SNP, of course, the second largest opposition party at Westminster, are all clamouring for one. Research Director of the polling organisation YouGov, Ipsos, forgive me, Kieran Pedley joins us. Kieran, what are the polls saying about the situation the Conservatives in at the moment? We've heard a lot of dramatic polls. What's the trend?
So it's hard to underestimate just what a difficult spot the Conservatives are in, to put it politely. So our most recent Ipsos political monitor last month had the Labour Party 21 points ahead. But I think more importantly than the actual voting intention polling, and there's a spread of that between anywhere between 20 or 30-point leads for Labour, is some of the fundamentals under the bonnet, so to speak. So there are two main issues that I would raise. The first is that 64% of the public consider the Conservative Party to be divided. That's almost twice as many that say the same about Labour. So a major challenge for the new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, will be to try and sort of quell that feeling amongst the public in the future. Secondly, 3/4 of the public do not have confidence in the Conservative Party's long-term economic plan for the country. And Labour are actually the party most trusted on the economy by a 13-point margin, 34 points to 21. So lots of numbers there, but I think fundamentally what Rishi Sunak needs to do is to show that he can build a united team, a united government, but also that he needs to try and restore the Conservatives' traditional reputation for being the best party on the economy. Of course, he was once upon a time a quite popular chancellor, at least during the height of the pandemic, but time will tell whether he can restore that reputation in the future.
Yeah, that raises a really interesting question, doesn't it? Because one of the things you and your organisation also regularly ask public opinion on in the UK is the issues that most concern them. Is it still the economy that tops the bill? And are there any others which remain of concern? I mean, we've heard, for example, about immigration. Is that still an issue for British voters?
Well, look, I mean, for voters, there are a range of issues that matter to them. At the moment, we're finding that the cost of living is top of voters' minds, and also the economy generally. I think we should also, I mean, immigration is never far away, particularly for 2019 Conservative voters. And I think if Rishi Sunak wants to sort of reinstall that coalition from 2019, that might be an area he looks at. But another area that actually I think is more important than immigration at the moment is the state of public services, schools and in particular hospitals. There are real strong concerns amongst the public about waiting times in the NHS, the ability to get a GP appointment or emergency care, and also parents are concerned about schools and education and the backlog post-COVID too. And there are of course loads of other issues that are important as well. So I think in a nutshell, what the new Prime Minister will need to try and do is balance economic management and sort of restoring trust in the Conservatives on the economy, whilst also reassuring the public that they can actually provide public services with the funding that they need, because that is a real strong public concern at the moment.
Kieran Pegley of Ipsos, thank you very much for joining us on BBC News. We are going to leave you now. We'll hear from Rishi Sunak's statement yesterday, and in a few minutes we'll be joining Hugh Edwards for live coverage of the events here at Downing Street.
I'd like to pay tribute to Liz Truss for her dedicated public service to the country. She has led with dignity and grace through a time of great change and under exceptionally difficult circumstances, both at home and abroad. I am humbled and honoured to have the support of my parliamentary colleagues and to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. It is the greatest privilege of my life to be able to serve the party I love and give back to the country I owe so much to. The United Kingdom is a great country, but there is no doubt we face a profound economic challenge. We now need stability and unity, and I will make it my utmost priority to bring our party and our country together, because that is the only way we will overcome the challenges we face and build a better, more prosperous future for our children and our grandchildren. I pledge that I will serve you with integrity and humility, and I will work day in, day out to deliver for the British people.